number one. When you hear someone longing for the good old days, take it with a grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt. We live in a great nation, and we are rightly proud of our history. We are beneficiaries of the labor and the grit and the courage of generations who came before. But I guess it's part of human nature, especially in times of change and uncertainty, to want to look backwards and long for some imaginary past when everything worked and the economy hummed and all politicians were wise and every child was well-mannered and America pretty much did whatever it wanted around the world. Guess what? It ain't so. The good old days weren't all that good. Yes, there have been some stretches in our history where the economy grew much faster or when government ran more smoothly. There were moments when, immediately after World War II, for example, or at the end of the Cold War, when the world bent more easily to our will. But those are sporadic, those moments, those episodes. In fact, by almost every measure, America is better and the world is better than it was 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, or even 8 years ago. And by the way, I'm not set aside 150 years ago, pre-Civil War. There's a whole bunch of stuff there we could talk about. Set aside life in the 50s, when women and people of color were systematically excluded from big chunks of American life. Since I graduated in 1983, which isn't that long ago, I'm just saying. Since I graduated, crime rates, teenage pregnancy, the share of Americans living in poverty, they're all down. The share of Americans with college educations have gone way up. Our life expectancy has as well. Blacks and Latinos have risen up the ranks in business and politics. More women are in the workforce. They're earning more money. Although it's long past time that we pass laws to make sure that women are getting the same pay for the same work as men. Meanwhile, in the 8 years since most of you started high school, we're also better off. You and your fellow graduates are entering the job market with better prospects than any time since 2007. 20 million more Americans know the financial security of health insurance. We're less dependent on foreign oil. We've doubled the production of clean energy. We have cut the high school dropout rate. We've cut the deficit by 2/3. Marriage equality is the law of the land. And just as America's better, the world is better than when I graduated. Since I graduated, an iron curtain fell. Apartheid ended. There's more democracy. We virtually eliminated certain diseases like polio. We've cut extreme poverty drastically. We've cut infant mortality by an enormous amount. Now, I say all these things not to make you complacent. We got a bunch of big problems to solve. But I say it to point out that change has been a constant in our history, and the reason America's better is because we didn't look backwards. We didn't fear the future. We seized the future and made it our own. And that's exactly why it's always been young people like you that have brought about big change. Because you don't fear the future. And that leads me to my second point. The world is more interconnected than ever before, and it's becoming more connected every day. Building walls won't change that. Look, as president, my first responsibility is always the security and prosperity of the United States. And as citizens, we all rightly put our country first. But if the past 2 decades have taught us anything, it's that the biggest challenges we face cannot be solved in isolation. When overseas states start falling apart, they become breeding grounds for terrorists and ideologies of nihilism and despair that ultimately can reach our shores. When developing countries don't have functioning health systems, epidemics like Zika or Ebola can spread and threaten Americans too, and a wall won't stop that. If we want to close loopholes that allow large corporations and wealthy individuals to avoid paying their fair share of taxes, we've got to have the cooperation of other countries in a global financial system to help enforce financial laws. The point is, to help ourselves, we got to help others. Not pull up the drawbridge and try to keep the world out. And engagement does not just mean deploying our military. There are times where we must take military action to protect ourselves and our allies. And we are in awe of, and we are grateful for, the men and women who make up the finest fighting force the world has ever known. But I worry if we think that the entire burden of our engagement with the world is up to the 1% who serve in our military. And the rest of us can just sit back and do nothing. They can't shoulder the entire burden. Engagement means using all the levers of our national power and rallying the world to take on our shared challenges. You look at something like trade, for example. We live in an age of global supply chains and cargo ships that crisscross oceans and online commerce that can render borders obsolete. And a lot of folks have legitimate concerns with the way globalization has progressed. That's one of the changes that's been taking place. Jobs shipped overseas, trade deals that sometimes put workers and businesses at a disadvantage. But the answer isn't to stop trading with other countries. In this global economy, that's not even possible. The answer is to do trade the right way by negotiating with other countries so that they raise their labor standards and their environmental standards. And we make sure they don't impose unfair tariffs on American goods or steal American intellectual property. That's how we make sure that international rules are consistent with our values, including human rights. And ultimately, that's how we help raise wages here in America. That's how we help our workers compete on a level playing field. Building walls won't do that. It won't boost our economy, and it won't enhance our security either. Isolating or disparaging Muslims, suggesting that they should be treated differently when it comes to entering this country, that is not just a betrayal of our values. That's not just a betrayal of who we are. It would alienate the very communities at home and abroad who are our most important partners in the fight against violent extremism. Suggesting that we can build an endless wall along our borders and blame our challenges on immigrants. That doesn't just run counter to our history as the world's melting pot. It contradicts the evidence that our growth and our innovation and our dynamism has always been spurred by our ability to attract strivers from every corner of the globe. That's how we became America. Why would we want to stop it now? Can't do it. Which brings me to my third point. Facts evidence, reason, logic, an understanding of science. These are good things. These are qualities you want in people making policy. These are qualities you want to continue to cultivate in yourselves as citizens. That might seem obvious. You know, that's why we honor Bill Moyers or Dr. Brunel. We traditionally have valued those things, but if you were listening to today's political debate, you might wonder where this strain of anti-intellectualism came from. So class of 2016, let me be as clear as I can be. In politics and in life, ignorance is not a virtue. It's not cool to not know what you're talking about. That's not keeping it real or telling it like it is. That's not challenging political correctness. That's just not knowing what you're talking about. And yet we've become confused about this. Look, our nation's founders, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, Jefferson, they were born of the Enlightenment. They sought to escape superstition and sectarianism and tribalism and know-nothingness. They believed in rational thought and experimentation and the capacity of informed citizens to master our own fates. That is embedded in our constitutional design. That spirit informed our inventors and our explorers, the Edisons and the Wright brothers, and the George Washington Carvers and the Grace Hoppers, and the Norman Borlaugs and the Steve Jobs. That's what built this country. And today, in every phone in one of your pockets, we have access to more information than at any time in human history at a touch of a button. But ironically, the flood of information hasn't made us more discerning of the truth. In some ways, it's just made us more confident in our ignorance. We assume whatever's on the web must be true. We search for sites that just reinforce our own predispositions. Opinions masquerade as facts. The wildest conspiracy theories are taken for gospel. Now understand, I am sure you've learned during your years of college, and if not, you will learn soon, that there are a whole lot of folks who are book smart and have no common sense. That's the truth. You'll meet them if you haven't already. So the fact that they got a fancy degree, you got to talk to them to see whether they know what they're talking about. Qualities like kindness and compassion, honesty, hard work, they often matter more than technical skills or know-how. But when our leaders express a disdain for facts, when they're not held accountable for repeating falsehoods and just making stuff up, while actual experts are dismissed as elitists, then we've got a problem. It's interesting that if we get sick, we actually want to make sure the doctors, like going to medical school, they know what they're talking about. If we get on a plane, we say we really want a pilot to be able to pilot the plane. And yet in our public lives, we suddenly think, I don't want somebody who's done it before.